I thought I'd just say a quick hello prior to starting the service. So glad to have you guys here with us. You're the early birds, you're the ones that are always up and sorted and ready to go before we start the service. As you know, this is our second week of our Heroes service. We're going to think about lots of different things, but maybe some chocolate as well. So think about which is your favourite chocolate hero, because I'll be asking that a bit later in the service. But thanks for being here, thanks for being here early. Look forward to seeing you later on in the service.
Our mission is to help people find and follow Jesus. And one way you can partner with us in this mission is to give financially towards the work of the Forge Community Church. People have been asking us how they can continue to support us financially, and it's really easy. To make a donation towards our mission, please visit forgechurch.com and click the Give button on the homepage. Now, we don't want something from you, we want something for you. A chance to play an active part in the work of the church. And we're so grateful for each and every one of you who chooses to give in order to support the Forge. Thank you.
Know that because God made us specially.
But the good news is that when we get stuck, God can help us to be unstuck.
Born is a boy, born of Jacob, one of 12 others. When growing up, he shares his dreams of his brothers, their stars bowing down to his own, leading to inevitable resentment in his family home. Whilst not Jacob's firstborn, he becomes Jacob's most blessed, the son loved and awarded the best. The chosen Behor, the one who inherit a double portion and more, taken from the skin of a goat, what Andrew Lloyd would call a Technicolor dream coat. One day, Joseph was with his father Jacob, who sent him to his resentful brothers in the field of Shechem, where they plotted to kill him. They wanted him dead, but shielded by his brother Reuben, they threw him in an empty pit instead, marking his coat that represented so much with the blood of a beast. And unbeknown to Joseph, his brothers report to his father that he had tragically deceased. Sold to Midianites, Joseph was brought far away to the house of Potiphar, where he was to serve the rest of his days as slave. But his reputation as a leader grew, taking responsibility of the whole household, and people knew that this kid could go far, attracting attention not least of who else but the wife of Potiphar. More than just a pretty face, Potiphar's wife on a few occasions even tried to get him to stay at her place, but Joseph refused her advances. But as she ripped his garment, changing his circumstances and producing his torn coat as proof of her accusations, Joseph was imprisoned for falsely accused abusive violations. Joseph was in another pit, this time a jail, where this time told his last breath he would inhale. Yet his journey was not at an end here. His dream interpretation was once again to appear. Two inmates came to him concerned with their dreams, a baker and a cupbearer, not knowing what they mean. But Joseph revealed to them one by one, first, the hope of the baker had gone, but second, a better end, redemption ahead for his winemaker friend. But the story of the winemaker forgot to retell, and 2 years passed for Joseph in that underground hell before Pharaoh had a strange dream as well, and finally his winemaker remembered the dream man in that dark dungeon cell. Cows eating cows and fresh grains decay, magicians and wise men found themselves in disarray, but Joseph was sent for, and Pharaoh's dreams he explained before explaining the disaster of 7 years of coming famine. And right there, Pharaoh breaks the cycle. Instead of Joseph being thrown into a pit, he raises him out. Instead of removing his coat, he provides him a new royal clothes, ordaining and adopting him as second in command of all Egypt. Years pass and the famine resumes. His long-lost brothers arrive in search of food. And whilst they first don't recognize Joseph's face, he reveals himself and offers no punishment, but instead tear-filled grace. His family comes to Egypt, and Joseph makes a way for the best for them to stay, and Jacob learns that Joseph is alive, reunited once more, father and son once more. A story of an underdog, of destiny, of suffering, of redemption, of grace, of wisdom, of slave to king, of adoption, of fatherhood, of brotherhood, of a hero who saw a need and met it, who knew his purpose and fulfilled it, who knew a price and paid it. Joseph, the dreaming Egyptian rising wonder kid.
Good morning, welcome to church this morning. My name's Helen and this is The Forge Church. We're so glad that you're here with us. Whether you're someone that's here week after week or whether this is all very new to you, we are so glad that you are here. Whenever you're watching this, wherever you are and whoever you are so welcome. We're in the second week of our Heroes series. Last week we were thinking about who is your hero? And you gave some great answers with some great reasons for why people are your heroes. This week we're going a little bit more shallow. I just want to know, which is your favourite hero chocolate? I've been thinking about it this morning and I often really like a soft centre, so I'd often go for cream egg, but actually this morning I think Twirl is my favourite, just pure chocolate. What's your favourite hero and why? Put it in the comments because we want to know. We want to know which is your favourite. Now, to say the least, summer has been odd for all of us. And some people are really embracing the difference and the change. And some people are struggling with it. Take a look at this pair.
Ben! Alright, Finlay.
What are you doing?
Oh mate, just touching up the old Hawaiian shirt, the hat, the specs. I'm looking pretty sharp. I'm loving the heat. I've got my summer jams on and this is the best summer ever.
Are you serious? Best summer ever? This is the same as every other summer. You can't get anything done because it's way too hot, but you know, I forced myself to go outside and cut the grass, but by the time I've popped the mower back in the shed, it's already time to cut the grass again. You spend months in the build up to summer thinking about getting that perfect beach bod. You have to do 2,000 sit-ups a day to ensure you get before you reveal your pasty torso to the rest of the world. And then you get to decide to actually slide into this ice cold pool. Why the heck's anyone doing that anyway? And some annoying 12-year-old bombs in next to you, completely soaks you. And don't even get me started about the holidays actually, because you spend ages, you pack about 1,000 items into your suitcase and then you use one pair of swimming trunks and one vest for the whole time you're there. You can't even take the kids anywhere. You spend at least an hour whilst you're there wrestling them to the ground to slather them in sun cream, and if they're not sticky from that, it's from 6 weeks of ice cream congealed to their face. If you decide to go to the park for maybe a picnic, maybe a barbecue, I mean, what's the point? You're going to get bombarded by wasps the moment you get there, and you've chosen the one spot. Of course you have. You put your picnic blanket down, that's exactly where the ant's nest is, so you've got to move that, and then later in the day maybe you're thinking, I'll go out for a nice walk. No point, absolutely no point. You're going to get bitten alive, you're going to get dive bombed by bugs everywhere you go. I'm carrying at least a gallon of water with me everywhere I go, and I still manage to wake up dehydrated in the morning. All I want to do is enjoy a sandwich without the primary ingredient being sand. All I want to do is sit in my car and not stick to the seats. All I want to do is have a moment where my skin isn't constantly burnt and pink.
Sounds like someone's looking forward to autumn.
No, not really, to be honest. I can't stand the rain.
Oh my goodness, that was a bit ranty, but maybe it resonates with you one way or the other. You know, summer has been tricky so far for so many of us because it's been so different and so unexpected in many ways. But we've been visiting people. We've been to see people on their doorsteps, socially distanced, just to ask them, what has lockdown been like for you? And how has God impacted this strange time? So we've been to see Sarah, and this is her story.
Hello, I'm Sarah, I'm married to Martin, and we have Emily, who's 2, and we are part of Forge Thurston. Now, we have been really grateful that lockdown has given us lots of opportunities to be able to teach Emily more about God. So even though we haven't been able to go to church in person, actually we've been able to show her that church carries on regardless, and that it's not just a place that we go to in Thurston, but it's something that we share together during the week as well. So Sundays she looks forward to, she gets excited by, she says about how it's a new church day today, and we watch those adult services together. She gets her musical instruments and plays them along to the songs, and joins in with the prayers and asks for Johnny or asks for Ben or asks for Helen as it goes on as well. And then afterwards we watch her church too, which she's just mesmerised by, she absolutely loves. And afterwards we try and then connect that with things that we've taught her or her Bible story books that she's got, if it fits with those as well. The songs, she just loves them. So we have a playlist which we play when we prepare our meals each day, and at the moment she loves playing musical chairs, so that is the backing soundtrack of choice as we play musical chairs too. The other day we asked, are you special? And it was in a completely non-church conversation, and she herself said yes, because God made me. So we love that she's learning these key Bible truths. So throughout all of this, it's definitely it's accelerated and been heightened because of lockdown. So we're grateful for the time that we've been able to have together, and grateful that it's enabled the Forge to make these resources available, which have helped and encouraged us to share our love for Jesus, and so that Emily can know that too.
Now he's buried beneath my shade. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my turn till I met him. I was breathing but not alive, and all my fears I tried to hide. It was my turn till I met you. You the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, but you called me to sing. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air I breathe in. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you call my name, shout out, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Oh, hey, oh, what a glorious day.
Thanks so much to the team there. Just so great to be able to hear those amazing lyrics. However you kind of respond to music, I just hope that's kind of resonated with you. I'd love to pray for us right now, so shall we pray? Lord God, I want to thank you for who you are. I want to thank you for the goodness that you have in store for us. I want to thank you that you promise to be with us and that you promise to bring freedom into our lives, Lord God. Jesus, I just pray that right now we've just heard the lyric that you can turn old things new, and I pray that you would do that in our lives right now. That where there's areas where we just like need that transformation, we need resurrection, we need new life being breathed in, that God, you would bring that right now. Jesus, we're asking this in your name. Amen. Hey, we're going to jump back into part 2 of our Heroes series. Take a look at this.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to part 2 of our Heroes series. We're outside Forge HQ this morning, but we all have a favourite superhero, don't we? People with brilliant powers who use it for good, for putting the world back together. But heroes really aren't a new invention. They've been around for literally thousands of years. In fact, if you were to go back a couple of thousand years and you lived in a particular part of the Middle East, you might have a document, perhaps not a comic book, but a document which would have a list of heroes from previous centuries that you would look back on that would help you decide the way that you were going to live in that day. And there was a document exactly like that, a document that we've been going through, a document called the Book of Hebrews. We don't really know who wrote it. There would have been a list of people of which you would have looked back on with just brilliant admiration. And it was written for a predominantly Jewish audience who had converted into this belief in this man called Jesus who had recently died and rose again. And it was written to show them that these faith heroes weren't in contradiction to their faith, but actually complemented it. In fact, this was going to be an extension of the faith that they previously had. And so last week we looked at this first hero, Abraham, and now if Abraham was a superhero, he would have absolutely been Captain America. He was the first in a long line of heroes, and he had this great character and integrity before he had any power. In fact, this is what we said about Abraham. Abraham was someone who partnered with God in putting a broken world back together through a radically hospitable and inclusive character. And so today we're going to be looking at somebody different. We're going to be looking at Joseph. And now if Joseph was a superhero that we would relate to, I think it would definitely be Spider-Man. He was a young teenage guy who perhaps wasn't particularly popular with his peers, who just had this audacious character. And yet one of the perhaps most famous Spider-Man quotes from the films would have definitely resonated in Joseph's life as well. And that really what we're going to find out that in Joseph's life, within all of this, with all of his identity, with all of the power that he was eventually going to hold, he was going to find this, that with great power comes great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. That in Joseph's life, when he had all of the power and when he had none of the power, with Joseph's life, when he was going to be someone who was going to be wrestling with his identity, he had to decide what was he going to do with his responsibility. Joseph's life is fantastic. It's a story that's been told literally millions of times in hundreds of different ways, whether it's movie producers or book publishers, primary school teachers or musical writers. The story of Joseph has captivated the imaginations of people for literally centuries, thousands and thousands of years, in fact. The story of Joseph we love because it's this story of an underdog who would eventually go on to achieve these great heights. It's a story of deception. It's a story of justice and injustice. It's a story of escape. It's a story of someone who was once found themselves in a prison who would eventually find their way out. It's a story of dreams. And so if you happen not to be familiar with the story of Joseph, really want to encourage you to go back to the beginning of the service and maybe just listen through the recap of the story of Joseph we gave at the start. But there's loads of stuff and stories out there, including, of course, the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical that will give you an idea of the story of Joseph. But here's the fascinating thing about the story of Joseph. When it comes to the story of Joseph, we very, very rarely tell the end of the story. And you might think that's a bit odd, and you might think, where am I going with this? But really, we never tell the end of the story. And the book of Hebrews that I was talking about shows us this. I mean, when it comes to this list of heroes, each of these heroes has a paragraph written about them. And it begs the question, if there was going to be one thing that was written about the story of Joseph, what was it going to be? I mean, surely it would be the dreams, right? And if it wasn't going to be the dreams, then maybe it was going to be his integrity that he showed at Potiphar's house when Potiphar's wife tried to get him into bed and he escaped. Or maybe it was going to be when he was in prison and he helped the winemaker or the baker. Or maybe it was going to be when he appeared in front of Pharaoh and he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. And when he was in front of Pharaoh, he showed this immense wisdom that was going to save the land of Egypt from complete desolation because of a coming drought. But none of those things is what Hebrews talks about. When it comes to Hebrews, when it talks about this amazing man of faith, this is what it says about Joseph and his father Jacob. It was by faith that Jacob, who was Joseph's father, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed in worship as he leaned on his staff. And it was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. It begs the question, out of all of the things that Joseph could be remembered for, all of his dreams, all of the moments at Potiphar's house, in the prison, and then in the courts of Pharaoh, why is it that the author decides to focus on where Joseph and his father Jacob want their bones to be buried? I mean, it's weird, but not particularly made up. When you look back in the story of Genesis, one of the oldest books that we have in the Bible, in fact, one of the oldest books we have in the world, it has an account of where Joseph asks for his bones to be buried. I mean, this is what it says. When the time drew near for Jacob, who was Joseph's father, to die, he called for his son Joseph and said to him, "If I found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh," which was this weird ritual of making promises, "and promise that you will show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt, but when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried," which was a land called Canaan, north about 350 miles as the crow flies towards Israel. "I will do as you say," he said, which was Joseph. "Swear to me," Jacob said. Then Joseph swore to him, and Israel, who was Jacob, worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. Why on earth is there this big deal about where they were going to be burying their bones? I mean, a little bit later on, Joseph has a very similar conversation with his brothers about where his bones are going to be buried. It's weird. Why is this going to be the thing that makes Joseph our superhero? Well, to answer that question, I want to ask you a question that maybe you've never considered about the story of Joseph before. After Jacob sends his son Joseph out to the fields to see his brothers, and his brothers tackle him down and throw him in a pit before eventually selling him on to the slave trade. And then as he gets sent off to Potiphar's house, and then he works in Potiphar's house for all of those years before being falsely accused of attempted rape by Potiphar's wife, and so he's thrown into a prison. And then after interpreting the dreams for the baker and the wine server, before eventually being pulled out to see Pharaoh and interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. And then Joseph is eventually honored with the second highest honor of all of Egypt, being the second most powerful man of all of Egypt. Why is it that when he is that powerful, when he has that much freedom, does he never go back to see his father Jacob? I mean, it's an odd question. Maybe you've never even thought of asking it. But he's in this position for 10 years, and yet he never goes back to see his father Jacob. I mean, it's weird. But there's a couple of different options to why. I mean, first of all, he could just think, my father sent me out to my brothers. He was part of it. He wanted me dead. He never wanted me at all. In fact, he was part of the plan to try and kill me. Or maybe he just thought that his father never came looking for him. All of that time in a prison pit or in slavery to Potiphar, he thought, surely my father is coming to look for him. And he never knew that his father thought he was dead because of his brother's deceptions. I mean, it's an odd thought, but Joseph never knew that his father really loved him. And so eventually when his brothers and his father come to Egypt in search of food and he finds his father Jacob again, they're reunited once more. Joseph is presented with an interesting choice. I mean, up until this point, Pharaoh has given Jacob everything he could have ever dreamed of. In fact, everything Jacob did dream of. He was in a place where people would come down and bow to him like the stars that he dreamed of and the wheat that he dreamed of as a child. Pharaoh had given him everything he could have possibly wanted, but at a price. At the price of living in Egypt, a land that treated life cheaply, a land where it was a toss of a coin if you were going to end up like a baker who was going to be executed or a wine servant who would be honored, where ultimately there was injustice and oppression for the vulnerable. In fact, Joseph even calls his son Ephraim, which means the person who was born in a land of an oppression. Or does he go back to his father? His father, who he hadn't seen in years, who he now had to trust was always looking for him, who was inviting him back into a land where God wanted to partner with him once more. A partnership that looked like that of Abraham, a partnership that looked like hospitality, a partnership that looked like looking out for the vulnerable, a partnership where life wasn't cheap, but in fact there was something more, a partnership with a God in putting the world back together. He ultimately had a choice. Does he pick Pharaoh, who seemingly gave Joseph everything he ever dreamed about, but who requires Joseph to buy into a wrong worldview? Or does he pick his father Jacob, who Joseph didn't realize was still hoping, who valued and wanted Joseph after all of this time, who invites Joseph into a better worldview? Ultimately, Joseph is presented with a question that actually we are all asked, that we are all presented for in different moments in our life. And the question's this: when you are given the opportunity to get what you want at the expense of what is right, what do you do? When you're offered the opportunity to get what you want at the expense of what is right, at the expense of what is good, at the expense of the storyline that God wants to invite you to of radical hospitality, of looking out for the vulnerable, where life isn't something that's cheap, what is it that you do? When you're presented with an opportunity to get higher up in a position or a role in a job at the expense of something that's right, what is it that you do? When you're offered the opportunity to get the quick fix and relief from that website, What is it that you do when you know that that can completely destroy you and your mind and your relationships? When you're presented with something that you want at the expense of what is right, what is it that you do? And so Joseph is presented with this option. Pharaoh, who lives in a land of abundance, who gives him everything that he ever wants, but at the expense of an oppression. Or his father, Jacob, who wants him to go back to a land, who wants him to bring his people back to a land where things can ultimately reach to a point where God can partner with them in putting a broken world back together. And this is what Joseph decides to do. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath. He said, when God comes to help you and lead you back, you must take my bones with you. So Joseph died at the age of 110, good innings. Then the Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin, not in Canaan, not in the land of his fathers, but in Egypt. I wonder if Joseph just stayed in this land for a little bit too long. I wonder if Joseph did what so many of us do, where we think that we can stay in the wrong place with the right values and assume that everything's going to be okay. And for Joseph, he died in Egypt and he was buried in Egypt, and that's where his descendants would stay. And it would lead to hundreds of years of slavery, that ultimately it would be hundreds of years before Moses would lead the nation of Israel out into the promised land that God always had for them. I mean, they could have been spared all of that if only they decided to leave when they could. What position, what situation are you in right now that you have the opportunity to get out of before it's too late? Because there's a principle that we can learn from Joseph's life, and the principle is this. When you decide to embrace what you want at the expense of what is right, you will eventually become a slave to your desire. When you go for what you want, and you right now sitting at home know exactly what this is for you, when you go for what you want at the expense of something, at the expense of a storyline that you know is good and right, you will eventually become a slave to it. You'll eventually lose that sense of freedom that you have. You'll eventually be waking up in the middle of the night wondering if you're found out. You'll find yourself in every opportunity looking over each shoulder. What is it that you're doing right now? Where is it that you find yourself that you need to escape from? Because Joseph asked for his bones to be buried. He asked for his ancestors to ultimately live in a land where they could partner with God in all of the things that God wanted for them. But instead, those people decided to stay in a place that was easy and cheap at the expense of what was right. Here is one thing that you can do in order to make this easier for yourself. You can make a decision ahead of time, and this is how you can do it. Have a deliberate conversation with the hardest person to speak to. What does that mean? Well, actually, in any given situation, and perhaps the situation that you can think for yourself right now that you're in, there is a person who it would be awkward to admit to the struggle and the wrestling match that you find yourself in your mind. The wrestling match that says, actually, you can get what you want, but it kind of means that you have to compromise on something that's right. Maybe someone in authority, maybe someone whose opinion you value. Actually, it's a conversation that admits it to that person that protects you later on when you really have to make the decision. It stops you from staying in Egypt for too long. Now, for me, I'm lucky I have a group of amazing guys who I can speak to long in advance about my thoughts and my feelings and the times where I'm tempted to go for what's easy and cheap as a result of what's right. And I cannot tell you how many times it's saved me from making a wrong decision. And it's allowed me to become someone who I can honestly say loves to partner with God in putting a broken world back together. It allows me, and it can allow you, to become the person we were always made to be. Who is it in your life that you need to have that conversation with? What friendship do you need to invest in order that you can have those critical discipleship conversations? Because ultimately, we will find that when you go after what you want at the expense of what is right, you will become a slave to your desires rather than living in a freedom that you were always meant to have. Why is it that Joseph was a hero? Well, the book of Hebrews that was written thousands of years after his life ended tells us He was someone who knew ultimately which land he belonged in. He was someone who ultimately knew the partnership that God wanted him to have with him. And that partnership is available for you as well. You can become the hero you are always intended to be.
Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. The promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, this is my confidence, you never failed me yet. promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet.
It's been a great morning. We've been so glad that you have joined us this morning. I hope that you've enjoyed the morning, but also that it has really impacted you. If we could help at all, if you would like to pray with anyone or speak to anyone, then just pop the prayer hands emoji in the comments or email us at info@forgechurch.com or prayer@forgechurch.com and someone will get back to you. Or you can contact us on any of our socials or direct message us. We would love to hear from you. We would love to chat with you and support you. We really hope you'll come back next week and join us for the next week in our Heroes series. Have a good week.
Here at The Forge, we believe that the work that we do with kids and young people is so important. If you've got children or young people in your household, we want to support you and equip them with teaching, community and activities. At a time where we're unable to meet in person, we still want to have a positive impact on their lives. Every Monday, we live stream kids' content on Facebook and YouTube. It's a fun, engaging way to learn about the Bible, and we always include an accompanying craft for you to do at home. You can access this throughout the week whenever is most convenient for you. For our young people, we're meeting online. So if your school year's 7 and above, why not join our Sunday afternoon or Tuesday evening Zoom calls? It's a chance for our young people to stay connected and access relevant teaching. If you want any further information on this, please check out the Forge website, www.forgechurch.com, or email me direct at kids@forgechurch.com or youth@forgechurch.com.
And how do we know that? Because God made us specially.
But the good news is that when we get stuck, God can help us to be unstuck.